Bad seas are never fun. We're recreational boaters, so we do our best to plan the weather and all that so that we don't get caught in bad seas, but every once in a while it just happens. But how well does the Ranger Tug R27 outboard handle in bad seas? In this video, we're going to illustrate just how the boats handle in rough water. What's the worst seas that you've been in on your boat? Please leave them in the comment section below.
Close your eyes, hear the voice within, calling this heavy.
When channel surfing was just 4 months old, we got caught between Elliott Bay and Des Moines. There was a strong southerly wind blowing with lots of fetch. The small craft advisory was supposed to go into effect at 5 p.m. that evening, and we thought we could get to Des Moines well before the weather arrived. We were wrong. The weather came in earlier, the small craft advisory was moved up, and we found ourselves crashing through 3 to 5 foot waves for 2 hours at 5 knots. This was our first experience. You want to get off that roller coaster, but you can't. There's no turning around either. The boat handled the seas just fine. Unfortunately, we were new to this YouTube thing, and we didn't have the cameras that we do today. Thus, we were unable to capture the actual sea state. But we learned a lot in those 2 hours. For our Southeast Alaska trip, I had the GoPro 360 camera mounted on the bow of the boat, and I was able to remotely turn it on or off. We had 2 days of really bad seas, Johnstone Strait and Clarence Strait, which we'll go over in detail. The first was Johnstone Strait and Seymour Narrows. The two go together. We go through Seymour Narrows, then Discovery Passage, then into Johnstone Strait. The wind and the tide were going the same direction, but we just ended up with 26 knots of wind coming off the bow and found ourselves in 2 to 4 foot seas. Water was flying everywhere, going well over the entire boat and into the cockpit. You will see 3 Ranger Tug R27 outboards, channel surfing, lemon drop, and anytime. We communicate a lot via VHF radio, scouting the channel looking for flatter water. There just wasn't any to be found. We tried speeds of 5 knots to 10 knots. It didn't matter. Johnstone Strait punished us. Inside the cabin, all of us were fine, however. None of us were scared or frightened. Well, until I called out on the VHF radio that I smelled something electrical smoldering, and I didn't know where it was coming from, and was worried about an electrical fire. Seawater had overflowed my clogged starboard scupper and caused my solar controller to short out, but we didn't know that then. This made Lemon Drop nervous thinking about a rescue in these seas. I told Lemon Drop at any time that I was heading to Port Neville. It's an anchorage about 3 miles away from where we were, to get out of the seas and to get the water to stop falling on the boat. Once the water stopped falling, the smell went away. Had it not been for the electrical smoldering, we would have just kept going through the seas until we got to Port McNeil, which was our destination. The second instance of rough water was on our travel from Wrangell to Ketchikan. We had 75 miles of the flattest water that you can imagine. Absolutely gorgeous cruising. The weather forecast had called out for 0 foot seas throughout most of the day. The last 20 miles, though, across Clarence Straits, both windy and buoy weather were calling for 1 foot on 3 seconds or 1.5 foot on 2 seconds. The tide was set to turn at 11:30. Our intentions were to get through Clarence Strait and into Tongass Narrows, which is the protected waters just north of Ketchikan, by 11:30 before the tide changed. Unfortunately, we were an hour late to the party, and we paid the price for being late. We went from doing 25 knots across flat water to whitecaps everywhere as we came around Misery Island. No joke, that's the name of the island. It's near Myers Chuck. You can look it up on a map. If you look aft, the cockpit on the R27 outboard is 3 feet from the white fiberglass down to the waterline. I'm calling this a solid 3 foot sea state with occasional 4 footers. We had the wake from both cruise ships also to deal with off in the distance. They were both doing 17, 18 knots, throwing probably a 4 or 5 foot wake off the back of each of them. So here again, Lemon Drop and channel surfing plowed through this doing 8 to 14 knots. We only had about 12 miles to go, as once we got across Clarence Strait and into Tongass Narrows, then it would flatten out, which it did. It took us 2 hours. Nothing was death-defying or even scary, really. I cleaned my scuppers the evening before, and they worked as required. The bilge areas in the port and starboard lazarettes was completely dry when we arrived in Ketchikan. But the video footage captured off the 360 camera I thought was actually really cool to see. For more information, be sure to check out our Southeast Alaska videos that cover Johnstone Strait and Clarence Strait. And thanks for watching.
If you enjoyed watching this video, click the screen to watch another.